Hello guys, welcome back to Math Zone African Motives. We are still on the trigonometry, and this one is a very, very important class that we are going to consider on trigonometry. Remember, now you know how to draw these graphs, okay? How to sketch the graph of sine of x, the cos of x, the tan of x, or the tan of theta, whatever that you're given now, you understand from our introduction that we had previously. Okay, this one is a condition where they draw the graphs for you, okay? Like this part, they will give you the graphs being drawn. Okay, then they'll ask you to find the values. Actually, you are forming the equation. It's like you are forming the equation because to find the value of A, to find the value of Q, you're actually forming the equation. To find the value of M, to find the value of N, you are actually forming the equation in that manner. Okay, so how do we find this? Okay, how do we formulate? Okay, how do we trace out? Knowing very much, we are supposed to be very careful knowing our graphs. Remember, the graph of a sine is like this, the shape, this one. But mostly, like this case, they will actually show you, they'll actually write the equation for you. So you don't even need to memorize to say, this is the graph for sine, this is the graph what for cos. But we know that on a normal graph of a cos, if y is equal to the cosine of x, okay, we are going to see that this graph is going to be limited from 1 as the maximum and minus 1 as the minimum. The same thing for the graph of y is equal to the sine of x. We saw that this graph here is going to be limited between a positive 1 on top and a negative 1 from 0 to 360 degrees, separated by 90 degrees as what we can see from 0, 90, 180, 270, and so on. Okay, but there we can see we do not have complete equations of our graphs, and we need to find those values. Okay, so the first question was not about those values, but it was to write down, okay, write down the amplitude and range of f, the amplitude and range of f. Okay, so they were talking about the function of f, which is our f. Our f is written, f of x is a cos, which is this graph of a cos x plus q. So this is our f, okay? Then the graph of g, which is this one for mx plus sine. So this is the graph of g, which is the graph of what? Of sine. All right, so from the graph of f of x, this one, we can see that it ranges from, it is taken from the maximum to the minimum at 0, and it goes back to the maximum at what? At 2. So meaning to say for the amplitude, remember our formula for the amplitude, all right? So this is 1. So our amplitude does not change, okay? The amplitude is still the difference, half of the difference between the maximum to the minimum value, okay? That is the amplitude, that is our maximum value. This graph of f, as you can see it, guys, you trace it like this, it cannot exceed, it cannot pass 2. As you can see, the maximum there, it is limited at 2. And it goes to the minimum here, it is limited, it cannot pass this point at what? At 0. That is at 180. The value of y there is what? It's 0. So that's the minimum, and the maximum is at what? Is at 2. So meaning to say our amplitude is going to be half of the maximum value, like I said, our maximum value, which is 2, minus the minimum value at the turning point there, which is at what? At 0, the value of y there. So that's half of 2 times 2 minus 0, that's a 2, and half of 2, which is what? Which is 1. So the amplitude was going to be a 1, okay? And the range of f, remember, range is taken from the minimum to the maximum, the y values. These are the y values. So as we can see, we talked about minimum value, the y value at 0, and the maximum value there, the y value at 2. So we also have the range from that one. So the range, we can take, these are the values of y. So y is going to range from 0 to 2, minimum to maximum, all right? So it's going to be minimum value to the maximum value of y there. So that means it is going to be taken from 0 to 2, okay? Or you can present it this way: y is greater than or equal to, then it will be less than. So this one, it must be greater than the minimum value and less than or equal to the maximum value. So you can write it in that way. That is how you can present your range in that case. These are the y values, the values of y, okay? Then question 2, write down the amplitude and range of G, okay? So we are on G this time, and G is this graph of sine, all right? The graph of sine, the one that we talked about. So this is the graph of sine, this one, okay? So again, the amplitude does not change. Maximum, half of the maximum minus the minimum. So on number 2, we are going to have our amplitude this time. We are talking about the graph of what? The graph of Gx. So we are going to have half of the maximum minus the minimum value. So what is the maximum value on G, on Gx, okay? On this G, it goes to the minimum value. It is limited there. Then the maximum, it is limited at 2. So it's going to be taken from the minimum value at -2 and the maximum value there, which corresponds with what? With a +2. So that's half of the maximum to the minimum, okay? So we're going to have our maximum, like I said, is 2 minus the minimum value, which is a -2. So it's -2 like this, okay? This negative here at minimum value. So this is going to give us the amplitude of G. That's negative, that's a positive. So that's half of 2 plus 2, which is a 4, and half of 4, which is a 2. So the amplitude was this one was going to be a 2. And also they do want us to find the range, and I say the range are the y values from the minimum to the maximum value. So you're going to just need minimum and maximum. Already we listed this minimum and maximum on our formula, but you're going to just go back and check, okay, minimum, we said it's -2, minus is what? +2. So it's limited between those 2 points, the minimum to the maximum, okay? So this is what you have for the range taken from the minimum to the maximum, or you can write it that way, that y is greater than, you can also write it this way, y is greater or equal to the minimum value, but less than or equal to the maximum value. That is your range. Okay, then after that, they want us to determine the values of A and Q, okay? The values of A and Q on question number 3. Determine the values of A and Q, okay? Where do we have A and Q? Let us go back to our function. You're going to see that A and Q are found on our f of x, which is the graph of course, this one, okay? So what you simply do is that you have to check this A here. A, okay, let us go back to the normal graph of cos. Remember we talked about the cos here. If we are given y is equal to cos of x, this number here, there's a 1 here. Here, there's a 1. So this one is the one that you see your graph marking the point, the first value at 0 versus 1. But this time, instead of our graph to be at 1, we are seeing our graph at 2. What is done? The graph is shifted, okay? It is from the normal point that it was supposed to be at 2, at 1. Now we are finding this point at 2. So this A is equal to 2, okay? It was supposed to be this maximum value that corresponds there is the one that you take. So it is a +2, but here it was supposed to be a +1. So our A is a 2. So our A in that case is a 2. So this is question 3. Remember, we are talking about A and Q. So A is equal to 2. Okay, what about Q in that case, okay? So take note about this, guys. Take note about this part, okay? We also have plus Q, this one. So before we conclude, because there's a plus Q, this one, plus Q means our graph we have shifted. The normal graph, of course, is supposed to be at 0. So before we conclude, it is supposed to be at 0, this one, okay? To start at 0 versus 1. So Q means also it has gone up. So meaning to say if Q has gone up, this A cannot be equal to 2. If this one was not there, if this plus Q was not there, it was going to be at 2. But because Q also is going up, Q is also affecting up. So it is best for us to know the value of Q first, so that we'll know what is affecting our K. How do you find Q? So Q is equal to half of this time. You are going to have maximum plus minimum. So this one is half of maximum plus minimum value, not maximum minus minimum. This one is half plus, maximum plus, okay? Which is half of the maximum value, which is 2, the minimum at 0, sorry, the minimum is at 0 there like this. So you are going to obtain half of 2 plus 0, which is a 2, and half of 2, which is a 1. So Q is a 1. So if Q is a 1, then we can tell that our A can be a 1 because Q is supposed to be here at 1. Okay, it has shifted up 1 unit, but already our point was at 1. So meaning to say A is not being affected. A was still at 1, but because of this plus Q, a shift going up, it is the one that affected our graph. So A is not going to change. A is going to remain at 1, not 2, okay? So A is going to remain at 1. So I have to affect the effect first, okay? The effect first to see how is our effect, how is our graph affected, okay? How is our graph affected first in terms of this what? In terms of this Q, okay? In the normal sense of our graph, how is it affected in terms of what? In terms of Q, the one that we are given. And also, we can have this value of A direct, okay? We can have this value of A direct. If you consider our amplitude, okay? If you consider the amplitude, from the amplitude now, what you have to consider is that your amplitude is a half, okay? You can consider this from the amplitude. Your amplitude is a 1. So you have to check, is it maintaining the shape of a course? The normal shape is like this, because you can have your graph like this. Instead of you having this graph or on 1 here, you might have it starting at -1 like this. You can even have it like this. Meaning to say, instead of you having it at this point, you are now having it down. So you reverse your amplitude to be a negative. Okay, but this one, it is maintaining the shape. So meaning to say the value of A is that amplitude that we just got as it is. So if we know that the value of A is the amplitude, we can substitute. Then to find the Q, it's either you're going to use this formula or you're going to say, since I now have the point A, I can substitute into my f of x, okay? My f of x is given as what? As a cos x. So my f of x, these are so many ways to answer this question. I just want you to see that there are so many ways to answer this one. So you can say, since I know that A is 1, so it means my f of x, which is y, in actual sense, it's y is equal to 1, which is the cos of x plus q like this. So to find the q, what you do is that you just check for a point which is complete. There is a 360 versus 2, this one on top, or 0 versus 2, or you can use 360 versus 2, this one. Okay, which is on what? On F. So you can take that point and substitute, all right? 360 versus 2. We've got a point at the last point, which is referred as 360 degrees versus 2. What does it mean? We've got the value of X and we've got the value of Y there. So the value of X is what? The value of X is 360. The value of Y is 2. So 2 is equal to cos 360. So I'm going to substitute X being 360 degrees here. All right, and what is cos 360? Let us go back to our calculator. All right, let us go to our calculator, cos 360, and see. Cos 360 degrees like this, it gives us a positive 1. So this is going to be 1 plus q, okay? So transpose this to the other side like this. We are going to see that we've got 2 minus 1, which is 1, is equal to q. So as you can see, we are still obtaining the same answer for q. Guys, there are so many ways to answer these questions. It's up to you. You just choose whatever way that you want, and you have to be careful when answering these questions, okay? Now let us check the other question, which is on number 4. All right, so let us just see number 4 here. So we still have the same thing on number 4. Let me see, I might need this one. Yes, I need this one to answer number 4, okay? I need this. Write down, okay, determine the values of m and n. Okay, so the values of m and n, they're found now on gx, of which our gx is given as m sine x plus n. So n can be found that way that we talked about, okay? Or you can find m first. You choose which one, guys. You choose which one do you want to start with. You can do your substitution. depending with which one do you know. Okay, M, like I said, can be taken from the amplitude, but you have to study it. Okay, so this M here can be taken from the amplitude. Our amplitude here was what? Was a positive 2. But this is what you're going to do now. Okay, this is number 4. So we need to find the value of M. From our amplitude, which is 2, we have to analyze it back to see how it is given. The graph of sine is supposed to be going this way, like this. This is our normal graph of what? Of a sine. But this one, it is in the reverse direction. It is being reflected along the x-axis, as you can see. It was supposed to be on top like this, 0. It goes on top, it goes back to 90, goes back to 3, like this. This was the normal graph of a sine, which was supposed to be at 2. If it is at 2 like that, okay, but now we are taking it down at -2. So it means our amplitude is going to be affected by a negative. So meaning to say our M is going to be equal to -2, okay? So M is equal to -20. That's why I said you have to analyze your amplitude. If it is in the same way your graph is supposed to be, your amplitude is the value of M. But if it reverses, your amplitude is affected by what? By a negative. The value of M, you multiply your amplitude by what? By a negative, okay? Then N can be determined from that formula, or there are so many ways. Like I said, N, we can now determine from our formula, or we can substitute N of the points, or we can take half of the what? Maximum plus minimum. I think I erased that formula. Remember, I said for that number that you add, remember this was gx is equal to m, the sine of x plus n. The number that you add or subtract here, you can find it by half of what? The maximum plus the minimum, not minus. You add this time. You add half of the maximum and minimum. So n was going to be half of the maximum value on the graph of sine. We said the maximum value was 2, the minimum was -2, or you can even go back and check again. On our graph of sine here, the maximum value was at what? At 2, the minimum value at -2. So you're going to subtract minus, it's going to be maximum, which is 2, plus the minimum, which is at -2, like this, okay? Which is different from the amplitude. Amplitude is maximum, half of maximum, minus minimum, minus the minimum. But on finding the value of any, this one, or finding the value of Q, this value that you add or subtract at the end, you add half of maximum plus, here, plus, you add, okay? So let us add and see. So as you can see, plus and minus, that's a minus. So 2 minus 2, that's a 0. And half of a 0 is what? It's a 0. So any number that you get there, I mean, any number that you multiply by a 0, it gives you a 0. Well, like I said, you can find this value of n by substituting, because now that you know the value of the value of m, that it's -2, you can substitute here, or we could have calculated n this way. Y is equal to m, which is we got our m from the amplitude. Like I said, you go back and analyze your amplitude according to the graph. Don't just take the amplitude as it is. No. Analyze it first. Is my graph maintaining the shape that I'm supposed to have the graph of sine as it is? If it is maintaining, you take the amplitude as it is. If it is opposite, you multiply by a negative your amplitude, okay? The same as the graph of cos. If you see it maintaining the graph of cos, you take your amplitude from that graph of cos as it is. But if it opposes, the moment just you see an opposite function, like the way it's supposed to be, now you are seeing it now taken down. This one is now on top like this. You take that amplitude, multiply it by a negative. That's how you find the value of m, the value that multiplies a sine or a cos, okay? So that means we can substitute that, because we got that our m here is -2. So it's -2, the sine of x plus n. So like I said, you can substitute and take a point. This is another way. You take a point that is on the graph of gx. On gx, do you have a point? Yes, there are so many points on gx. This one, our gx, there's a point here, 90 versus -2. 180 versus 0, 360. So you can take any point. So you can take this one, 90 versus minus 2, 90 versus minus 2. So you say the point is 90 degrees versus minus 2. Okay, that's the value of x, the value of y there. So the value of y is given as what? As negative 2. So we are going to substitute negative 2 is equal to negative 2, the sine of x, which is our x is 90 degrees plus n. So we want to calculate the value of n. So it's going to be minus 2 is equal to minus 2 sine 90. So this is minus 2. Okay, let's see. Yes, minus 2 sine of 90 degrees like this. This is going to give us a negative 2. So we're going to have negative 2 plus n. So to find the value of n in this case, we are going to transpose our negative to this side. It becomes a positive. So that will be negative 2 plus 2 is equal to n. Negative 2 plus 2, that's a 0, which is equal to n. So as you can see, we are obtaining the same value of n, just like from the formula. So it's either you know the formula or you know how to find it from the substitution. It's up to you. Okay, so guys, let us revise as much as we can. We need to work with more question papers. We need to work with our introductions, okay? Watch the videos on introductions, okay? Watch the videos on introduction. Understand what is trigonometry, okay? We talked about that, all those videos on introductions. So make sure that you watch them and understand everything about the angles and so forth. And this can be, at least it can help you to answer these questions. Okay, we shall see more exercises on this type of a question on finding of unknown values and also determining of the amplitude and the range from a given function, from given trigonometric functions that they actually draw them for you. All you just need to do is to find the values of the unknown. So we shall see more questions like that in next classes.